Hello there, and welcome to this triple bill Jarl showdown against a Riptide on the coolest bow in Flesh and Blood, Barbed Castaway. The way this video will go is I have retrospectively looked at the first two games and taken a few notes, and the last game I cannot remember and haven't reviewed, so I'll be making comments on the fly. Jarl is actually a pretty good matchup for the style of Riptide. The only version of Jarl that scares me is Count Your Blessings Jarl, as that deck is degenerate and basically an auto loss for any deck with Dominate and limited damage. What a fun card. I'll save my CYB rant for another day. So lastly, before we jump in, if you'd like to see more content like this, then don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Game 1. This Jarl is clearly teched for aggro decks based on the equipment suite. Maybe he's bored of expecting aggro. Fortunately for me, not a single one of those frostbite equipments matters because I'm only sending one attack per turn. Heart of Ice is a bit annoying, but I'm not running that many D-reacts, and I can just load with Castaway in response if need be. So here, plays Winter's Bite, I pitch the blue because I want to use Castaway in my turn if I can, and the blue Frostfang here isn't really a problem. Now here I choose to get rid of the Remorseless and save the Drill Shot because in the early game when my opponent still has armor, I think the Drill Shot is a lot more relevant. I want to get chewing through the armor as quickly as possible because either my opponent gives me armor to stop the arrow or it gives me cards and I have tempo. Now yeah, here I pitch the Spike Pit Trap. It's good in the stack because in the late game it will come in for a lot more damage if it triggers. And both the Melting Point and the Battering Bolt are in here just to help me present larger numbers. You'll see over the course of these three games that my list varies ever so slightly as I was just testing a few things out. We'll save one of the Battering Bolts for next turn and we play with 6 cards, which is always good. So we're getting a Winter's Bite again. This is, again, I think he was preparing for an aggro kind of meta. This deck is not aggro, well, my deck I mean. So I pitched the Murky next to the blues, now I just need to send a buff down as well, and I've got 10 Dominate in the late game. Now an alternative line I could have taken this turn is I could have pitched the Release the Tension, because Battering Bolt has no on-hit really, and the release would have been very good next to the Murky as well because it would have stopped any late game D-reacts. My opponent overblocking here is nice though, and also you can see that the Frostbite does absolutely nothing. Now, my opponent has 2 floating. It doesn't really matter because it's just the hammer. I block with the Battering Bolt and the hammer triggers the trap. I send Line It Up down to go next to Murky Waters as my buff. I think a better line here though would have been playing the trap, pitching the Premeditate, so I have a buff next to Murky, and then go play the Line It Up, pitching Codex, flip up Battering Bolt, and then send the Drill Shot and save the Codex when my opponent has an Arsenal. I could also just send the Battering Bolt and pitch Codex for a time when I can get a Dominate arrow back. I'm just checking my opponent's graveyard here. The only attack in his graveyard of any sort of threat is Mangle, but I've not got any -1 counters, so giving the Mangle back doesn't really matter. So I just go for Remorseless here. It's good damage. And it is coming in for 8, so my opponent has to give me armor or their whole hand. Now, because my opponent takes the full 8 damage here, I now know that this game is never going to fatigue. 8 damage is way too much to take with what I've got left in deck, so I don't need to conserve threat density as much. So my opponent goes for a big Dominate play here with the Mangle that I graciously gave him. But luckily there's no unhit for this, so it doesn't really matter. I block 3 here, as I can't use the Intoxicating Shot. My plan here is to flip Drill Shot, send it for 7, Arsenal Endless, and keep playing a 6-card hand. Could also just block 9 and send 7 with no aim counter, which is, from a numbers perspective, better, 16 versus 14, but I really want to get through my opponent's armor as quickly as possible. I put a counter on the gauntlets when I hit with the Drill Shot here, as that's the only place that takes away 2 life from my opponent, and 2 is better than 1. You can see early game, I'm just trying to get these drill shots off as quickly as possible, just to go through my opponent's armor. And giving it the encounter makes it very awkward to block, because again, opponent has to give me their full hand, or as in most of their hand, or they have to give me more armor than they'd like. So this is a red Winter's Bite, which is a bit annoying. I pitched down the buffs as a last pitch stack resource just in case this goes to fatigue. With hindsight, I maybe could have discarded a 2-block buff and kept 6-block ready in hand for something like a Command and Conquer, because I don't want to have to give up armor against Jarl. And this Buckling Blue is very easy to deal with because I got a 3-block, so yeah, pretty nice. Now on this upcoming turn, I opt to send Drill Shot again because I want to get through armor, and next turn Tunic will be online so I can just flip the Endless Arrow up in case it's clogging my arsenal. With hindsight, maybe sending Endless is better because it lets me keep a 6-card hand potentially. I'm not 100% sure where to put the counter when the Drill Shot does hit here. I put it on the head. Putting it on the head, chest or shield is a bit pointless. I could put it on the arms, but I want him to block with it at some point because it'll maybe prevent some dominates or keeping Channel 8 Frigid around for a bit longer. So I decided on the boots. I think I probably should have gone with the arms though. He is unlikely to get the space to use them for their effect in this game. Now, I've got quite a bit of a life lead, and I don't want to give up 2 of my Dominate arrows because they're very limited in their amounts. So I just take the CNC here so that I can send 7 Dominate, because Stone Rain with Seek and Destroy is the dream team. Now this will either permanently rip a card from his hand or eat up the last of his armor, with Murky set up in Arsenal for the following turn. And if you've seen my video on how to use Stone Rain properly, you'll see the relevant rulings for this. I recommend checking out if you don't know what I'm talking about. Now we can see the effect that Drill Shot's having. Just all those -1 counters are coming in super handy here because this can't be fully covered. I'm surprised I get what I get. I'm surprised I get the Heart of Ice here, to be honest. I'm happy to see it go because now he's basically naked. So I just block 6 here. I don't want to have to deal with the on-hit effect. So here I decide to take a bit of a setup turn, I think. Oh, I use the Tunic on his turn so that I get an extra -1 counter. I'm just sending 7 Dominate, which isn't particularly special, but given the low life total, it's effective in this scenario. And I've got a Dominate for next turn as well. Here, a bit weary of the pummel, but at the same time I didn't give him a chance to block, so I don't know, maybe it's just a bluff. I decide that the pummel is almost certainly coming, and so here what I do is, or what I should do, is I'll pay for an encounter at instant speed. I'll then reload the other Dominate arrow, and with Sync I'm going to get rid of one of my cards. Oh no, I put the buff down, sorry. Yeah, the buff is probably better to put into my arsenal because I want to send Murky for, well, lethal at this point. Yeah, the pummel was really, really obvious because no blocks. And I guess Stone Rain being at the bottom of my deck now, if we somehow go to second cycle ever, which I'm always worried about with the Jarl, because without Dominates you actually can't force through any damage. Now, I sink here because if I draw into another D-React, that's very nice. If not, I can just pitch the card away and I don't lose anything, which shows the flexibility of Barbed Castaway. This is very unfortunate timing for channel like Frigid. If there's no CLF, this hand is guaranteed lethal. Sadly, I can't use all of it. I decide to still send Disruption because I don't want to keep allowing the Jarl to have 4-card hands. I will keep that Codex for my kill turn for the Dominate, because it'll also line up when I've got Tunic. Now, this isn't the most efficient play, but again, don't want to let my opponent keep a 4-card hand, and it is taking 2 cards out of them because this does demand a block, and it will take a card away from the Dominate as well. No, my opponent decides to not block. Well, I guess that makes sense as well. Guess I should have checked my notes a bit better. But either way, 3-card hand, there's not much a Guardian can do with a 3-card hand. The only thing I really am afraid of with that is just a CNC. Luckily I've got the blue here, not that it really matters because discarding at this stage doesn't change anything. Now, this Frostfang is coming in for 5, so I can't just cover it with 1 card. Because I am going to try and kill my opponent next turn, I decide to give armor here. There's basically no risk at this stage of the game for me giving armor because of, you know, if it's early in the game and they find Frozen to Death or Mangles, then it might be problematic. But I pretty much got guaranteed lethal, so I don't need to complicate things. So, play out the Premeditate. At instant speed, we'll pay to load with Barbed Castaway, pitching the blue, and then we'll grab a Murky Water. The Tunic here gives me that 1 extra resource that I need to flip up the Murky and send it for 10 Dominate, which gets over any possible D-Reacts in their arsenal except Staunch Response, but I've not seen that, so I'm guessing they weren't playing it. Yep, they block 3. And that's game 1 finished. Now game 2, this is a different setup from the previous Jarl opponent. Sledge is probably the most annoying hammer to face as it doesn't trigger any of your buff traps. However, it does mean that Jarl has less armor and needs to keep more cards to swing, so not all bad. There are some pros there. Turn 0, I don't decide to filter because my hand functions fine under Channel 8 Frigid, and Drill Shot 7 in the aim counter, as we've seen, is a pretty good start to the game. Yeah, once again, insane value from that drill shot, just taking away 2 armor block and 2 life. Super, super good. And yeah, I don't know why my opponent didn't block that, given that they're just sending hammer. It kind of suggests pummel, but again, it's just on sledge, so I don't really care. Yeah, I'm just thinking how best to navigate this channel. I don't really like this play. I end up IPing myself as well because of it. If I remember correctly, I was a little bit tilted as I just come out of a game that I shouldn't have lost versus someone else. So for this entire first half of the game, I play like a monkey. But yeah, first half is played very poorly, and I should just block 6 pitching the Deadeye and not IPing myself. So I decide to say no blocks to the Oakenhold as Channel 8 Frigid is going and Tunic will be on 3. So there may have been the opportunity to send 10 Dominate. I decide to go for a setup turn here pitching the Deadeye now, which means I lost 3 life for no reason, as I could have just used my Tunic counter to pay to flip instead. So yeah, very inefficient play. And I don't want to send the Stone Rain like that. I want to try get a better buff to add to it. Now, Terra Sunder here, with 2 buff traps, gives me a very interesting choice. Of course, I get punished for not sending, because if I'd sent, I'd have the spell Arsenal slot to fully cover this. Now, the Boulder Trap and Buzzsaw Trap, they're the same value numbers-wise. I ought to go for the Boulder Trap here, because I really want to get through my opponent's armor, as I value that very highly, as you may have heard. I also get punished for not sending... Oh, I'd already said that bit. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Yeah, I'm completely punished for not sending that Stone Rain there. But, to be honest, with what's in my hand, it's not that good anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But I end up sending the Stone Rain for 7. Yeah, decide I can't IP myself again, so this will just have to do. It probably eats up maybe a little bit of armor if my opponent really wants to block it, and if they don't, then it at least disrupts their turn. But yeah, it is interesting to see how the knock-on effects of one misplay can really start to spiral in a game. Like, that Deadeye misplay from the chain reaction turn was pretty bad, and I'm still paying for it even now later into the game. So here I just block with the Buzzsaw because I have no reason to block with an arrow. I can make use of every single one of them, and there's no on-hit here. Now, I decide to send the Stone Rain, as if I get a Ponder, I can double Arsenal by loading Endless at instant speed. Another line here would have been to instead send the Endless and keep the Stone Rain for better buffs, but if the Endless hits then I IP again, which is not really desirable. I decide to load the Endless face up when this doesn't hit, I believe, so that I have an extra Arsenal slot. Also note that my Tunic remains unused, so if we go back to the turn where I pitched the Deadeye to instead of blocking with it, then my Tunic would have been online by now. So again, just minus 3 life for no good reason. Yeah, Spinal Crush is... it's a bit annoying, but it's pretty easy to block out. I've got a lot of agency in what I do. I decide to block and deny the Crush. Only blocking 3 and getting... yeah, I'm just trying to remember what I did here. Yeah, we just send, again, just send the drill shot. Getting the CNC is pretty nice here. I assume the aim counter made it very inefficient to block, but once again we're seeing just how little value my opponent is getting from his armor because of all these drill shots with aim counters. Now, the fact that my opponent blocked with a CNC, has Tunic up and 1 floating, is very sus, but I have to block 6. I don't really have a choice. Because if it's a CNC pummel, then it is what it is. Like, I'm quite behind here anyway, so I can't really play around it. Luckily, it was just a bluff, which I knew about. And so, my opponent opting to Arsenal that card instead of the CNC they blocked with means that I have to assume it's quite a disruptive attack. Or, God forbid, a third CNC. Snatch that draws Snatch, and this arrow, it hits, which is very handy. I decide to send the Murky down into the stack, as it is next to Deadeye and some blues, just in case the game goes to second cycle. Also, my opponent has said no blocks and kept 5 cards, so I'd like to Arsenal the Boulder Trap, and paying to load Murky face up is just a waste, because I don't get the Dominate. Now we see why my opponent kept that hand. Again, I'm scared of the pummel, because he's just so many cards in hand, but apparently he doesn't have it. The Boulder Trap puts in some good work here. Maybe should have blocked with the Endless instead of the Murky, just because the odds of me getting a Murky then face down my arsenal for the following turn are quite high. Now, if you'll notice, my opponent can no longer cover my breakpoints very easily. Quick dodge flexors, insanely inefficient, and Tunic is pretty valuable. So I'm either getting 2 cards or my breakpoints are coming through here. Now the Spinal Crush, blocking 6 is pretty straightforward here, because I want to send Endless Arrow for, what's the math on that, 11? Yeah. We can see the usefulness of Melting Point. It's not the effect, it's just the extra damage comes up very nicely. So I feel like with this play, it's a bit of a pivot point in the game. I've been quite far behind due to my own bad plays, and my opponent's been opening fairly well. The fact that I get this through is a bit of a turning point. I feel like I'm back in the game at this point. Because, again, my opponent's armor is gone, and he's not running that many D-reacts. For the rest of the game, he has to respect a lot of what I do, or he takes a lot of damage. So here I put the encounter on my opponent's turn so that I can fire Stone Rain with a counter on my own turn, because Barbed Castaway is a once per turn instant. And in this hand you can see the value that playing yellow traps provides. I'm a big fan of the yellow traps. Being able to pitch them gives you so much more freedom of choice, and I use it to line up the dream team of Stone Rain and Deadeye. Now I choose to trigger Deadeye first when I take the most devastating card from his hand. I decide to take the CNC, as that's the only one that I might struggle to block. And if it's like a pummel sitting in his arsenal, then the CNC becomes terrifying. Just checking what he's used. And here we see an example of some of the experimental cards I was trying out. That's the Dragon Seal there. I just had this in to see if it helped with the CYB matchups without wrecking the non-CYB ones. I decided to block 6 here in case there's a pummel. I don't want to take 7 because I'm quite low on life. It's worth noting though that there is an argument for keeping the Battering Bolt, because if I send 7 with my Endless and it gets blocked out, then I could potentially break. Yeah, there's no world in which I'd play the seal here. It didn't end up making the final list. However, keeping a card in hand means that if this Endless Arrow hits, I can pitch away the seal and play out the Endless Arrow. Load it face up for next turn. I could also break my boots here just for another attack, but I don't really think it's worth it. I don't want to lose out on the 1 life here because I am quite low, and I don't want to start getting frostbites. I'm in quite a good position here. There's no reason to take any risks. Okay, so we've got him under Seek and Destroy, and I can just sniff the pummel here, especially, yeah, so I opt to block, I think 7 here, which was a hard choice, but I figured out if there's a pummel, the crush effect goes through, so there's no point in holding cards. I maybe should have just fully blocked with his hand, because if I'm blocking expecting pummel, then it makes no sense to hold on to 1 random card. I guess I keep it for later, but we ain't going second cycle. But you do get to see how good Barbed Castaway is at avoiding hand disruption. So I send Endless. I've got my Tunic online to load it if I need to. This Endless Arrow has been insane this game. I get the Tunic, which is pretty much the last piece of equipment that I'm worried about. Well, it's the only one that actually offers good value when blocking. Now, the 5 go again here with 1 card left in hand means that there is some form of Frostbite giving card or Crumble to Eternity. I'm guessing it's the Frostbite one, because why would you keep Crumble at this stage in the game? Which means I opt to keep my blue, and I get rewarded for keeping said blue. I did block with my armor when I didn't need to. That was a bit weak, but yeah, it was just blocking psychological damage. There was no need to block there with the armor. Once again, seeing the power of Tunic here to just give that 1 extra resource for flipping an encounter arrow. I think that made sense. So my opponent uses Crown just for its effect, but crucially no extra life gained from blocking with that armor, thanks to our friend the drill shot. Okay. So 5 has been presented, which is lethal, so I do have to give something here. The line I'm thinking of taking at this point is playing the buff from Arsenal and playing the buff from hand, reloading the Remorseless and sending it. I block with the trap just so I've got traps engraved for Murky should it come up. Getting rid of the Sink Blow here is insane value. Insane. Not that actually would have mattered because this is Remorseless, but there's a world in which it wasn't. I'm not sure why I paid to load here. Either way, this play either buys me full tempo or it wins me the game. We'll find out very shortly which one that was. And I won the game. So next one is game 3. As I said at the start, I haven't taken notes on this, so I'll just be making it up as I go along, observing stuff. Now this is again looking like an aggro Jarl. Whenever I see Stalagmite instead of Rampart, I'm so happy because it does nothing, as I said. This was actually a really nice hand. It's a shame my opponent went for me, but I at least got to... well, actually I didn't get to do anything. Yeah, that was a bit bad. Took 2 damage, but at least 1 good crush effect is out the way. I'm just going to adjust my screen here because I'm struggling to make out what colour these cards are. Okay. Yeah, so I should opt for the drill shot here, yeah. Once again, prioritizing drill shots, just really trying to get their armor gone as quickly as possible. And I promise I won't say that for the rest of this video. And just like that, loads of armor gone, that's a win as well. We're seeing again, no Frostbite, or sorry, Frostbite basically has no effect on what I do. So I have to give 2 cards here. Let's see why. Ideally, I think I'd block with... Well, I could also send the Heat Seeker and keep the Collapsing Trap, pitching the Intoxicating Shot. Oh, I see the line I go for here. Yeah. So I'm going to flip up the Stone Rain, saving it for some later turns where I've got better buffs. And I'm just going to shoot Heat Seeker. So if the Heat Seeker hits, I get an extra Arsenal card. That's insane value. And if it doesn't and they block it, I'm getting at least 1 card from hand, which into Guardian is very good. Oh, what I want to say about the giving the armor so early as well, there is actually an argument that that's actually quite good into Riptide, because if you're expecting the Riptide to be on drill shots and boulder traps, then blocking with it before I get value from my cards and you get the value from yours is okay. I had to read this for a bit because I'd never ever seen this card in my life. If it was fused, gains if it hits a hero, create Frostbite token under control. I still don't know what it does. So blue pommel here, fantastic timing for the boulder trap to show up. I'll be interested to see where I put the -1 counter. I would put it on the gauntlets here because I don't actually think the effect comes up that much in this matchup. There's not really much point putting it on... I mean, you could put it on the stalagmite as well, but there is a world in which the frostbite might matter if I decide to flight path to try and kill. And I don't want to put it in the Crown of Providence because I'm sending breakpoints, so giving him an armor, 3 pieces of armor that cover a breakpoint each is not ideal, in my opinion. I probably would have blocked with the crown here, but I mean, drill shot once again, showing how much value it is. Either I get 2 cards, a card and armor, or I get to put -1 counter. Still no amazing buffs for this Stone Rain. So the CLF is annoying, but I don't find it that threatening. I'm happy because this deck blocks very well, so I'm happy sometimes to just take an off turn and just block out. Let's see what I do here. Shame that hammer wasn't for 4. We saw our opponent as well pitch a blizzard there, which means he thought it was aggro Riptide, and yeah, we can see I just decided to pass here. My turn doesn't do anything without being really inefficient. I get rewarded because no ice cards are pitched, so the channel is going, so I just have to block the Spinal Crush. I think what I'd probably do here is block 9. I could instead block 6, use the Tunic counter to pay for the line it up, and send 10 Dominate. That would mean I don't really make full use of the Ponder though, which is a bit unfortunate. Oh, I decide for this line instead. Okay, yeah, this also works. It's actually the same thing but better. I'm washed. Now, a slight improvement on that would have been using the Tunic counter to pay for the trap. Oh no, the Tunic counter costs 1 anyway. Never mind, ignore me. Again, washed. Previous Tim is better than current Tim. We get the last of the armor here. I'm pretty happy about that. I still get my damage through, I get to disrupt him, and I also get a Ponder. Pretty good value. Now I do draw what is possibly the worst Ponder target in the deck, that being Line It Up in Deadeye, just because it cost 1, Melting Point 2. Because it's often quite taxing to pay 1 and then also load in a card with a buff after that, flip up and give it the aim counter. So it's just a bit inefficient. Now this wasn't fused, so I just take it. And I instead send a Juicy Dominate. It's really unfortunate I couldn't send the Melting Point as well, but here sending 10 Dominate with the dream team of Seek and Destroy, Deadeye, and Stone Rain is like perfect, so I can't really complain. And in case you're wondering and you've not seen the Stone Rain video or you're unaware of the ruling, both Stone Rain and Seek and Destroy are my triggers. So in the end step, even though it's my opponent's turn, I choose the ordering of my own triggers. So I can resolve Stone Rain and then Seek and Destroy, and they lose the card that Stone Rain banished. Yeah, you can see Tech for aggro. Hypothermia does literally nothing against this deck. I think... I'm not sure what I take here. Maybe the Sink below. He's under Seek and Destroy, so I wouldn't take the Sink. I probably take the Imposing Visage because I don't want him to get out a Crumble to Eternity, as I think his way back into this game is blowing up armor and then kind of snowing me under with Frostbites. And none of the attacks in his hand really concern me. This here is an insane hand. But it looks like not going to be able to take it. Although the frostbite doesn't actually matter because we've got a blue. Okay, I'm going to predict that I took this because the frostbite does not matter. There's also no way for me to block it out efficiently. It does mean no aim counter, but I'm still going over any blocks he can present with 4 cards. Based on what I know about what he's playing. So I'm just seeing, do I decide to send the big damage or do I put the aim counter and save the buff for the next turn? I think I go for the buff. It's near the end game. This is just a lot of damage. It does possibly mess up with my consistency, but like, who can resist sending 15? Who can resist? Yeah, we get a juicy 6 damage through plus the blood rot, and then the tunic as well no longer blocks. So from here on in, if I don't brick, I think I should win the game. This is an interesting hand. No buffs is a bit rough. I get punished for not keeping the melting point. I'm curious to see what I do here. Okay, I just send 6. Not the best turn, but I guess what I can do is arsenal the Stone Rain, and then on my opponent's turn, use Tunic to flip it up, give it an aim counter, and then play the Codex and possibly give an aim counter, or if I've just got loads of buffs, I just play the Stone Rain. I could also Flight Path here. Now, do I make the play? Okay, yeah. Because my opponent doesn't attack, I don't even need to use the Tunic counter. So we go for the Codex line, it looks like. Sadly, no Murky Water here, because that would have been pretty good. 10 Dominate isn't bad. But sending 7 Dominate with the Dream Team, Seek and Destroy, and Stone Rain is pretty good still. And it means I've got a Dominate for next turn. So any buff and long draw should be enough to close this one out, provided I don't get disrupted. The perfect buff. The perfect buff. I mean, he's under Seek and Destroy, so it doesn't actually matter. So this one does need blocking. With my opponent being on 5, I should block with armor and a trap here, and just long draw for 11 Dominate to see the game out. Let's see if I did that. Yeah, this works too. Could have also just kept the Endless and blocked with the Flight Path. Sorry, I could have kept an extra trap, used the long draw on the traps, and kept the Endless in hand after all this, just in case my opponent survives. But he doesn't. And yeah, that is the triple billing against Jarl. I will say, these were aggressive Jarls, and aggro Jarl is a pretty good matchup for Riptide. You'll notice there was a severe lack of D-Reacts in those decks. I did have stuff to deal with that. If you can start chaining up your Seek and Destroys, or you get your Release Attentions, that's very effective. So into the slower, fatiguey Jarls, you still have a chance, but you really do need to pitch that. You can see in those games that I was, at least at the start of the game, when I wasn't sure what kind of Jarl I was against, I was trying to set up the beginnings of a pitch deck just in case. And into CYB Jarl, you probably just don't stand a chance, because they have so much armor and they're generally more fatiguey, so they won't be triggering your traps as often, which means that by the time you've chewed through their armor, it's the late game and CYB has become very good and you have a very limited amount of damage in your deck. TLDR, please ban CYB, I hate it. But yeah, hopefully this has given you some sort of insight into how to play against Jarl. You can see against the slower decks that Barbed Castaway definitely has legs. It doesn't struggle like it used to kill people. Having access to these dominates is insanely effective. I didn't even utilize them as to their max in these games because I didn't need to. And what I mean by that is I didn't play out all 11 dominates that I can send. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed and have a good day.